Today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show, the story regarding schools using their resources to advocate against the school choice amendment. Amendment 2 continues evermore. I know last few days our first segments have been talking about it, but it just keeps getting worse. Schools just continue breaking this law. We have evidence coming out of not one but two more school districts where they use their official positions, email lists, or meetings in order to advocate for or against a constitutional amendment. We'll be playing the audio from one of those meetings today, and then also be reading to you the letter that was sent out in another school district. Two totally different school districts. We'll be covering that. On the subject of schools, though, we have happening actually today, the day you're listening to this recording, if you're listening to it on Thursday, August 29th, as we speak, pretty much, there's a Welcome Back Pride event going on at the Newtown BCTC campus. That's Bluegrass Community and Technical College, a part of the Community Technical College system. This is a school system basically almost entirely funded by the state, heavily subsidized by the state. It keeps tuition low, but it receives hundreds of millions of tax dollars from your pockets, and they're having a man dressed in lingerie doing a drag performance in front of at this Welcome Back Pride event going on right now. We'll be covering that, exactly what's going on. And then finally, we'll be going over just, Kentucky opened up the opportunity for people to sell medical marijuana with some parameters. And in the process, they're offering non-refundable licensing fees in order to go ahead and apply to be one of these lucky, putting that in quotations, few stores that get to sell medical marijuana. We'll go into how much they're raking in and how much it points to the fact that all the state cares about, all Democrats care about specifically, is about delivering as much money as they can to their coffers, and they'll use anything they can to go ahead and do that. We'll have all that and more today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show, so please make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe. I say it every day, but you're not doing it every day, and I know you're not, so you better do it. I'm looking at you. And if you just felt guilty right there, it's because you know you're not doing it. Also, please make sure you leave a review if you can, and those are on platforms like Spotify and Apple. Review the podcast. That helps so much when you issue a review. That's the best way people understand how many people are listening to a podcast and whether it's popular or not, but also it works the algorithms. It pushes the podcast up so other people will discover it on their own. And so if you haven't left a review, and I know there's hundreds of you listening to this that haven't, please go over to either Spotify or Apple and leave a review, but only if it's 5 stars. If it's going to be less than 5 stars, don't leave it. I don't want your feedback. I don't want constructive criticism. It hurts my feelings too much. I'm just joking. Of course, if you want to reach out to the show, go ahead and email info@theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's info@theandrewshow.com. Let's dig down into it. So, we've been covering for the last few days how these school districts keep using taxpayer funds to advocate against passing the school choice amendment. Now, they want to claim that it's, we're trying to protect ourselves. We're trying to protect government entities. But think about it this way. If there was a tax raise that was on the ballot, right? So let's say a school district tries to raise your taxes over that 4%, the amount that they're allowed to do before it becomes down to a referendum, and then a referendum gets called, and the state, then your school turns around and uses taxpayer funds to advocate for the tax increase, strictly using the funds they took from your pockets to run a bunch of ads and a bunch of other things against it. Well, you'd be equally as upset. And I know there's examples of them doing that, but still, it's very clear. Like, government cannot use money it's stolen from you to advocate to steal more money from you and to advocate for laws or constitutional amendment changes. That it's truthfully a dark and truthfully a 1984-esque world where they can take money from you to then pump you full of propaganda to get you to vote a certain way. Of course, they pump you full of propaganda all the time. I get that. But we're talking specifically about voting. And that seems specifically wrong to do. But there's a few school districts who decided they wanted to go ahead and get involved into this particular realm of things. And one of those includes the Warren County school systems, okay, Warren County public school systems. And they sent out this email here, and it goes as follows. Amendment 2 fact of the week. Should Amendment 2 pass, the legislature would have full autonomy to divert public school funds towards students who are already in private schools. As an example, more than 60% of students in Arizona receiving school vouchers, Arizona's Scholarship Tax Credit Program, were already attending private schools. Well, hold on, pause right there. So you're just admitting, you're admitting that 40% of those receiving vouchers weren't in private schools before? I thought the factual claim that they're making here is that it would only help parents whose kids are already in private school. It wouldn't help anybody else. But almost half of the vouchers being used in Arizona are going to families who didn't have kids in private school before. Almost half. 40%. That's a fair amount and certainly flies in the face of your so-called factual claim. But we continue. Similar legislation, House Bill 563, was struck down as unconstitutional by the Kentucky Supreme Court in 2022, but the bill did not simply disappear. Should Amendment 2 pass, House Bill 563 would no longer be unconstitutional, thus paving the way for tax dollars to be distributed to students. Let me explain what 563 was once again. Because remember, they're saying this is a fact. This is factual. Well, 563 wasn't a voucher bill. 563 wasn't even diverting funds currently going into public schools. All 563 was about was providing nonprofits the ability to offer scholarships to underprivileged children, specifically means-tested children. And those scholarships would be funded by taxpayers who choose to donate money to those nonprofits and then would get a almost dollar for dollar rebate, or not rebate, but a dollar for dollar credit on their taxes. So if you owed the state $5,000 and instead you donated $5,000 to this nonprofit, you would owe the state nothing, basically. So it wasn't diverting funds already committed to the schools. It would have been diverting funds that get donated for kids to go, underprivileged children to get to have private options. And if you donated money to those programs, your child was not allowed to benefit from the program. So it was literally only a tax credit program for people whose kids wouldn't benefit from the scholarships. That's what it was. That isn't a voucher program. That is literally helping underprivileged kids find other educational options. But of course, that isn't something the schools want. See, here's the dirty little secret nobody wants to talk about. Or at least they don't conveniently forget to mention, right? When money follows the kid, well, if the kid chooses to stay at the public school, the money stays at the public school. So when they're talking about this will defund public schools, what they're really saying, what they have to be admitting at this point, what they have to be, is that they would lose students. Because keep in mind, the state only gives, in SEEK formula, about $4,000, $4,300 a kid a year, okay? Now, there are plenty of homeschool pods and other options that can be done for close to that amount or real close to that amount. But also, it provides the opportunity for, if you have a private school tuition of $12,000, $13,000 a year, but you're getting a $4,000 or $5,000 deduction, that might be enough to make it now attainable for more people, which means it can offer opportunities. But also you can find things like homeschool pods and other groups and all kinds of different options that could open up if that was a full voucher system. But the kids could still go ahead and decide to stay at the public school. So them losing out funding means that they have to be admitting that the public school does a worse job than private schools, which means you have to come to a specific conclusion that what is best for children clearly is to go to private schools. There are kids out there that they would get a better education. The parents would believe they're getting a better education if they had the opportunity to go to a private school. So you have to admit that you are not delivering the best education you can to the kids. You have to admit it in order for that to be the case. And if you're admitting that, what you're saying about these child's education is, darn them, I don't care about those kids' education. You know what? I'd rather lock them in place. I'd rather these kids get a worse education if it means that I get to keep my funding. And nothing makes it clearer that this has never been about the students, and that's why public schools fail. Because they're not focusing on the student, they're focusing on the system. They're focusing on the administrators. They're not focusing on what's best for the kids, which is why kids would leave, and it's the exact reason why they would fight so strongly, in fact, illegally, keep in mind, illegally, against Amendment 2. Because they hate the kids. Maybe they don't hate them, but they certainly don't care about them. For them, the educational system isn't about children. Because if it was, you would say, you know what? I don't care who's getting funded. I don't care where the money goes. I don't care whether it's in our coffers or somebody else's coffers, or the parents get it, or whoever gets it. I don't care. All I care about is kids having the best educational outcome they can, and I don't care how we get there. That's what it means to be for the children. But instead, this ain't about kids. It's about systems. It's about administrators. It's about a bloat at the top of our educational system trying to protect itself and breaking the law to do it. And as more evidence of them breaking the law, we have this. This is coming. Corey DeAngelis posted this audio. Those of you who listen to the show know we've been getting a fair amount from him recently. And this is coming out of the school district. This is coming out of McLean County Public Schools. McLean County Public Schools. And it was a district-wide orientation meeting. And the superintendent got up there and gave the following speech. I'm going to play it for you, all of it, its entirety. And then I am going to go back through it and talk a little bit to you about some different parts. Because he says a lot of things in here that I think we need to address. But let's take a listen.
During the 2024 regular session of the General Assembly, a question on the ballot will ask voters whether to amend Kentucky's top legal document, our Constitution, and give the state legislature new authorities to send public funds to schools outside the system of common public schools. As written, Amendment 2 seeks to create exemptions, loopholes for 7 different sections of the Kentucky Constitution and allow public dollars to fund private schools and other private education providers. The law does not require such private or charter schools to be accountable for the same oversight, rules, standard, governance, transparency, or open enrollment policies as Kentucky public schools. Now here's what a yes and no vote will do. A yes vote will allow the General Assembly to divert funds and provide financial support to non-public school students. This includes private schools, charter schools, and other educational institutions. In some cases, a yes vote would cause public school districts to have to raise taxes to compensate for the loss of funding that will be shared with such private school providers. And a yes vote possibly will have to, districts will have to close some schools completely. A no vote means, it comes out to be, maintains the current system where public tax dollars remain exclusively for public schools. Also, continues investment in support of public schools that primarily K-12 provide. My goal here today was to educate you on facts and implications of the yes or no vote. Amendment 2. I can't tell you what to vote. I'm just here to give you the facts.
Just here to give you the facts. So I think it's worth then, if you're just here to give us the facts, to point out how you're factually inaccurate. You're factually wrong, and of course you are. Because you didn't just give us the facts. You used loaded language and you drew conclusions that don't exist with what this constitutional amendment does. On top of that, you then tried to fearmonger people into believing things that aren't true. So I think it's worth stating. Well, let's go back and listen. I'll stop when he says something that's inaccurate. I'm going to warn you, we're going to stop a fair amount, but let's go ahead and take a listen here to this first chunk again, and let me tell you what he said here that was wrong.
During the 2024 regular session of the General Assembly, a question on the ballot will ask voters whether to amend Kentucky's top legal document, our Constitution, and give the state legislature new authorities to send public funds to schools outside the system of common public schools. As written, Amendment 2 seeks to create exemptions, loopholes for 7 different sections of the Kentucky Constitution.
So he says, as written, Amendment 2 seeks to provide exemptions and loopholes to the Constitution. Loopholes to the Constitution. Now, I don't know what his definition of loophole is, but I do know what it is commonly understood as and as defined by, if you Google what's the definition of loophole. And it is implied to mean that there's unintended consequences or areas of the law where it's vague in order for people to be able to use that vagueness to their advantage. In order for them to receive unintended consequences. So we'd understand this like tax loopholes, where sure, technically you're supposed to spend XYZ on taxes, but there's all these unintended consequences and these ways that you can take exemptions that were supposed to be pretty straightforward, that now you can kind of use, and you can structure your company in a certain way to take advantage of a different taxing system than maybe you're supposed to. That would be kind of a loophole. Legal, but unintended. Maybe you could argue is intended, but it's not like when they initially wrote the law, they meant, or they specifically stated in the law, hey, this is not meant to be a loophole to get away from these taxes, but people are using it that way. So the thing about Amendment 2 is there's no unintended consequences here. There's no loopholes being put in. It's changing the Constitution. That's the way constitutional amendments work. That's the way they work. You're adjusting and changing the Constitution. But you want to use loaded language because you want to get the listener to draw the conclusion you want them to draw. But let's keep listening here.
And allow public dollars to fund private schools and other private education providers. The law does not require such private or charter schools to be accountable for the same oversight, rules, standard, governance, transparency, or open enrollment policies as Kentucky public schools.
So that right there, also a lie. He's just lying there. First off, this is a constitutional amendment, not a law, a constitutional amendment. The amendment has no policies attached to it. So to claim that the constitutional amendment allows money to go to schools that won't have these same accountability and open enrollment policies and blah, 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 as all these other places do, is completely inaccurate. Because there's no law attached to the Constitution. You're just saying things. You've created a la land where laws that don't exist suddenly do, or Amendment 2 does things that suddenly it doesn't do. Because here's what will change. Amendment 2 passes, gets added to our Constitution. You know what will change? Nothing. Nothing will change right away. The only thing that now can happen is the legislature is free to pass whatever laws they want to. And they could pass a charter school law that now has a way to fund it. There's charter school law kind of already on the books that now they could come up with a funding scheme for those charter schools. But something they don't want you to talk about, they want to talk about charter schools as if they're just some la land thing that doesn't exist, but that's not accurate. There's already laws in place regarding charter schools. And for those of you who don't know what a charter school is, it means the school is founded by an agreed upon charter, rules, regulations, and performance that is agreed upon by the chartering authority. And according to Kentucky law, the current chartering authorities are the school board or the governor. I believe maybe in urban county governments, the mayor, or in counties, perhaps the judge executives could also agree to a charter, possibly. But I know for a fact it's the school boards and the governor. That's who can charter schools, make agreements for schools. So the question becomes, you say, these schools, they're unaccountable for blah, blah, blah. Literally, they can't operate without an agreement with the government of how they will operate. And that agreement is between the legislators. That agreement is between your school board and that school in almost every circumstance. The school boards will get to decide that. Now, perhaps the governor now gets to decide too as well, and the legislature could pass law creating charter schools and a charter agreement. But still, that involves a charter agreement. And if you want open enrollment for a charter school, then that would be made in the charter agreement. That isn't passed with the amendment. That is inaccurate. That is a fallacy. He's saying a lie. He's not just giving you the facts. He's trying to get them to come to a certain conclusion. Let's continue.
Now here's what a yes and no vote will do. A yes vote will allow the General Assembly to divert funds and provide financial support to non-public school students. This includes private schools, charter schools, and other educational institutions. In some cases...
Now, if he had stopped there, he'd be fine. He wouldn't have said anything unfactual or anything else. But now, he's creating his own facts. He's creating his own beliefs. That's all he's doing, creating his own beliefs. So here we continue now with what he... with his additional superfluous explanations.
A yes vote would cause public school districts to have to raise taxes to compensate for the loss of funding that will be shared with such private school providers. And a yes vote possibly will have to...
Does he name what those some cases are? What cases is he talking about? Why would they have to raise taxes? Because you got to think, they're saying, well, the lack of funding that's given to them. Keep in mind, the lack of funding would only be that they've lost students. Right now, they're only getting $4,000. Once again, $4,000 a student from the state. But keep in mind that the rest of their per student spending in some districts, at every district in the state, it's at least like $12,000. Some districts like Jefferson County Public Schools, they're spending more like $23,000. But keep in mind, they're spending more than that. Well, where does this money come from? It comes from local taxation, and now it comes from federal government. Well, that doesn't go away. So if they just lose, right now, the most they're looking at losing is $4,000 a student that leaves. But that actually means they have more money per student, because remember, their property taxes stay the same. Their federal funding stays the same. If anything, they would actually have more money to spend per student. He then goes on to say that they may lose schools. To remind you, take a listen.
Districts will have to close some schools completely. A no vote means...
Some districts would have to close some schools completely. Well, why do you need more funding then? Your school's closed. The funding's gone. Because your school's closed because it doesn't have enough funding. You don't have enough students, that means, for a school to close. Students left. So much so you don't need a whole entire school. Why is that a problem specifically? To the teachers, there's no problem. The jobs didn't leave. The kids still need instructed. They just get to choose to work for somebody other than the school district. So really, it's just a problem of, for you, the superintendent, you, the school board, you, the administrators, maybe have less power. We don't need as many of you there. And you also have less power. There's less peasants in your fiefdom. There's less people you get to control, less money you get control over. Keep in mind, this entire fight from the administrators is nothing more than about control. Having more control over more employees, more of your money, and more students. And if they go elsewhere, they don't get to keep that control. It won't cost the taxpayers another dime. It won't cost teachers their jobs. If anything, they'll end up getting higher pay because now they have to compete. There's competition on the marketplace. Right now, there's only one hiring person. There's only one person to hire teachers in most of these counties and most of these school districts. You get one employer to choose from. That's it. Don't like what they're doing? So what? Screw you, teachers. You don't get to choose. But school choice options, well, now you do get choices when it comes to the teachers. And guess what that means? A competition for your labor on the marketplace. That means more pay, period. They talk about how Kentucky is one of the lowest pays for teachers in the entire country. An assertion that I disagree with when you adjust for cost of living and a lot of other things. But let's take that assertion at face value. Well, Kentucky is one of only 2 states in the entire nation that doesn't offer school choice options. So it makes, everyone else that's getting paid more, where teachers are making more, according to you, offers school choice. So how's that not better for the teachers? Now, I know I've talked a lot about school choice. So we'll put that to the side for today. I'll try not to talk about it again this week. But these schools keep breaking the law. I don't know what you want me to do. But I do have another topic on school choice along the same lines. And it deals with a case coming out of Hardin County, Jessamine County, and Boone County. Republican parties there sued the state because KREF, Kentucky Elections Finance Authority, told them that they're not allowed to expend party funds, political funds, on a political ballot measure, which seems like a misinterpretation of the law. So Chris Weiss, they hired him as their attorney. He's a great attorney. He's my attorney on some cases. He took it to the courts. And they didn't want to grant them an emergency injunction against KREF because they said, well, we don't know if that will be a good outcome. So immediately, under First Amendment guidelines, Chris Weiss took it to the Sixth Circuit Court. And based upon what he's seeing out of the courts, he says that his appeal will be granted, that the injunction will be granted very quickly because the way they're behaving, they're trying to ask KREF, like, hey, what are reasons you think this won't succeed? And we need to know, immediately, which indicates that they're planning on granting this injunction. Well, the Attorney General has joined now Chris Weiss on the case, on the side of the parties, which is something very interesting because KREF actually apparently, we're told, asked the Attorney General to join them on their side of the lawsuit. And the Attorney General was like, no, I actually don't agree with your assertion here. I think you're misreading the laws. Because of course you are. Why would a political organization like a Republican Party that's allowed to expend as much money as they want in actual candidate elections, that's allowed to coordinate as much as they want in candidate elections, be now unable to expend money in ballot measures? That doesn't make any sense at all. They're already a political organization. They're not a taxpayer-funded entity like the school districts who are spending money on ballot measures illegally. That also leads to the question of how are we going to hold them accountable? They keep doing this on that side of things. How are we going to hold them accountable? What's the politics of that? Because, if you hold them accountable, the concern here is the not very friendly media may turn around and try to shape the narrative on school superintendents actually getting criminally charged for misuse of tax funds in a way that makes the public more sympathetic to their cause. That is of concern. It's hard to do Because if superintendents and individuals start getting arrested for misuse of tax funds, well, if they write those headlines accurately, that could certainly push people towards the school choice amendment. So there is some politics involved here, but they need to be held accountable, I think, regardless. I guess the question just becomes, when do you hold them accountable? If from a political standpoint, if you want this to pass, what should you push for? But from a legal standpoint, I guess from the Attorney General standpoint, they should just pretty much pursue it. Forget the politics. You need to do what's right, what's wrong, and they're doing something wrong here. They need to be held accountable. Certainly need to be held accountable. Now, BCTC is doing a Welcome Back Pride event. This is a heavily taxpayer-funded entity, and that's occurring today. And somebody at the event got some photos to me from the event that showed a drag performer in women's lingerie, a dude in women's lingerie, dancing up on stage. Now keep in mind, BCTC heavily subsidized by the taxpayer. Any expenditure the BCTC does for contracts and things has to be approved by the state legislature. It goes through their committee on contracts. Their budgeting has to be approved by the state legislature. This is a taxpayer-funded entity. And what are they doing with those taxpayer funds, with your funds? Well, apparently, they're at least providing a venue, if not outright paying for a drag performer to dance on stage in women's lingerie. Now, keep in mind, the Newtown campus, where this is occurring at, is one of the most popular places for kids, for high school students, to attend for career and technical training. So just from a sheer, even take the tax dollar aspect out of it, and I'm told by the people that there were kids there, young kids as well, that were viewing and seeing this performance. But there's also high school students, still kids, under 18, seeing these performances because they're there because of, well, they get schools there, they get schooling there, they get technical training there. Now, in any other world, no matter the kid, if they're under 18, they're a child, and if you expose them to pornographic content, you would be arrested. But in this world, there's people who try to claim that drag shows are not pornographic content. They're not sexually explicit content. Even though that's what they've always been, even culturally, until recently. Culturally speaking, it was well accepted that this is sexual content. That's why they took place in places like strip clubs and bars, where it was already age controlled, where people were already there and agreeing to see this kind of sexual content. And most importantly, where of consenting age. Because see, the other thing, and I post about this on my socials, and people try to claim, well, you know, they're choosing to be there. The parents are choosing to take the kids there. Why do you have such a problem with it? Well, kids can't consent. And parents can't consent to them viewing pornography and sexual content for them, because that is still considered abuse. But then also from the taxpayer aspect, we pay for this facility. We pay for this event. One way or another, we're paying for this, and this is what they're doing with your money. So on top of the fact that it's inappropriate to be exposing children to this, you also have the aspect that your money's being spent on it. How does that make you feel? How does that make you feel that your money's being spent on this? This is, and a bill was in our legislature that passed Senate committee. Senate, it was sponsored by Lindsay Tishner. It passed the Senate committee, the Senate, the House committee. But for some reason, old Osborne, Speaker of the House, decided to not pull it to the floor. And the bill specifically was taking aim at banning drag shows from taking place on taxpayer-funded places. For some reason, couldn't make it to the House. So-called conservatives, they describe themselves as very conservative, couldn't manage to ban taxpayer-funded drag shows. I'm not even talking about banning kids at it. We're just talking about banning taxpayer-funded drag shows. Now, you'd also ban sexualized performances. The bill also would ban sexualized performances from taking place within certain distances of places where either children would be, churches and schools, or from children being at it, a sexually explicit performance which, I would argue all drag shows are, but this was very specific on what that would be. But, legislature couldn't find themselves the gusto, couldn't find themselves the wherewithal to actually pass it. You land that squarely at the feet of leadership. People like David Osborne, Speaker of the House. If he wanted that bill to come forward, it was coming forward. Finally, we have just a little note here. So, for those of you unaware, Kentucky legalized medical marijuana under certain conditions. This was kind of a process done through the governor, kind of first wrote an executive order, kind of put the legislature in a position. And so they put it forward. So regardless of how you feel about medical marijuana or not, I don't particularly care about your feelings to understand and explain this story, because no matter which side you're on, this is clear evidence that the government will use whatever opportunity they can to rob every dollar they can from people. They view everything as a revenue source, and that includes this. So as of me recording this, about 1,000 individuals have applied for some type of marijuana license in Kentucky. And they're only granting a certain amount. In fact, for the actual retailer license side of things, about 800 people have applied for it as I'm talking to you. Do you know how many retailer licenses they're handing out? Only 40. Yet 800 people have applied for it. And in that application process, they give money for their application. It is non-refundable. The state has brought in over $4 million in licensing applications for 40 licenses that they're going to hand out to retailers. Over $4 million in non-refundable licensing. And then, how do you think they're going to hand out those licenses? Do you think it's going to be a fair and honest and completely non-political process, or do you think it's going to be about who gets along with who? Who's rubbing the right pumps? Who's greasing the right wheels? And I bring that up because if you're pro-marijuana, it's just more evidence to you, no matter what it is. Be careful what you ask for. Because every single thing the government touches turns into a corrupt and ridiculous process that's about revenue and lining pockets. So as you're shaping your legislation, maybe you should be careful. People applauded, the pro-marijuana people applauded when Andy Beshear put in place an executive order to push forward medical marijuana. And like I said, I'm not going to go into whether I'm for it or against it. Probably surprise you. Because when it comes to medical marijuana, I probably have a little bit different views than some of you. And when it comes to recreational marijuana, I probably have different views than what some people would expect me to have. And I don't have the time to go into it today. But what's important here is the government just once again doing everything they can to make as much money as they can. Well, y'all, that's what I got time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Thank you all so much for joining us. We'll be back here tomorrow. Hope you have a great rest of your day.